Man cannot discover new oceans unless he has the courage to lose sight of the shore. Throughout human history, growing up has always meant leaving the familiar behind. Leaving home, leaving protection, leaving the safe harbors of childhood. But in the modern world, more and more people seem to never leave that harbor at all. They remain in comfort, familiarity, and short-term pleasures, while real life waits for them on the other side of fear. In the psychology of Carl Jung, this type of person is called the Puer Aeternus, the eternal child. In this video, we will explore the psychology behind this phenomenon and why so many people today feel trapped somewhere between adolescence and adulthood. Stay until the end of the video, because in the final part we will talk about how someone can break out of this cycle of postponement and begin stepping into their real life. And if you enjoy videos that explore the deeper layers of human psychology like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future content. Part 1: Puer Aeternus. When an adult still lives with the mind of a child. In the analytical psychology of Carl Jung, there exists a psychological image that he and his student Marie-Louise von Franz frequently discussed: Puer Aeternus, the eternal child. This term is not meant to celebrate youthfulness or optimism. Instead, it describes a psychological condition in which a person has matured biologically but has not fully entered the structure and responsibility of adult life. Individuals who embody this pattern often live more in a world of possibilities than in the world of reality. They have many plans, many ideas, many potentials, yet when the moment arrives to transform those possibilities into concrete action, they often experience hesitation, delay, or a deep fear of failure. Jung observed that the human psyche naturally seeks the safety of the familiar, and this tendency can lead individuals to unconsciously postpone their psychological maturation. What is particularly striking is that this phenomenon is not merely an individual problem. It increasingly appears as a widespread social pattern. According to a 2023 report by the Pew Research Center, roughly 60% of young adults in the United States have lived with their parents at some point during their 20s. This represents the highest level recorded since the Great Depression. Many sociologists suggest that this delay reflects not only economic pressures, it also signals a slowing of the psychological transition into adulthood. Another survey conducted by Gallup found that the proportion of young men who report feeling a lack of clear purpose in life has increased significantly over the past 2 decades. These findings echo an insight Jung suggested nearly a century ago. When individuals fail to develop a strong inner structure capable of confronting reality, they tend to retreat into psychological safe zones. These can take the form of imagination, postponement, or short-term pleasures that temporarily relieve the pressure of real life. For this reason, the Puer Aeternus is not merely an abstract psychological concept. It is a pattern that helps explain why so many people today feel suspended between two worlds, too old to remain children, yet not fully ready to step into adulthood. Part 2: The Mother. Complex: the invisible thread that binds a person to childhood. In the analytical psychology of Carl Jung, one of the most powerful psychological forces shaping human development is the mother complex. This concept does not simply refer to the natural love between a mother and her child, which is essential for healthy development. A mother complex emerges when the emotional bond between mother and child becomes too strong and persists for too long, interfering with the formation of an independent identity. During the earliest years of life, the mother is typically the center of the child's psychological world. She represents nourishment, safety, and the first relationship through which the child learns how to experience reality. For this reason, the experience of the mother is often deeply internalized within the unconscious. The psychoanalyst James Hollis describes this internalization as a powerful cluster of emotional energy, a psychological structure that may continue to influence behavior long after childhood. In healthy development, the child gradually learns to separate from this early dependency. They begin to explore the world, take risks, face failure, and slowly develop a sense of identity independent from their parents. But when the mother complex becomes too strong, this separation process may be delayed. Instead of moving outward into the world, the individual unconsciously seeks a return to the original state of safety. Jung believed this dynamic to be one of the central psychological roots of the Puer Aeternus. Those with a strong mother complex often experience the external world as unpredictable, dangerous, and overwhelming. Meanwhile, the image of the mother, or symbolic substitutes for her, represents absolute safety. As a result, individuals may attempt to maintain this dependency in various ways. Sometimes this appears literally through long-term dependence on family support, but in other cases the dependency becomes symbolic. A person may unconsciously seek a maternal figure in romantic relationships, longing to be cared for, protected, and relieved of the burdens of adult responsibility. Others may find substitute maternal shelters within modern forms of comfort. This might include endless entertainment, video games, social media, or addictive habits. In a psychological sense, these environments recreate the protected state of childhood, where reality can be temporarily avoided. In his writings, Jung observed that individuals dominated by the mother complex often fail to fully enter what he called the battle of life. Instead, they seek what he metaphorically described as sleep in the arms of the mother. In that state, responsibility is postponed, risk is avoided, and reality slowly fades from view. For this reason, understanding the phenomenon of the Puer Aeternus requires looking beyond surface behaviors. We must examine the unconscious psychological forces that keep an individual bound to dependency, because sometimes the thread that binds a person to childhood is not external circumstance. It is an invisible, emotional bond formed in the earliest years of life. Part 3: The Absent Father. When no one leads you out of childhood. If the mother complex pulls an individual back toward childhood, then in the psychology of Carl Jung, the father represents the opposite force. The father symbolizes the principle of the external world. He represents structure, law, responsibility, and most importantly, an invitation to step into life. While the mother provides safety and protection, the traditional role of the father has often been to guide the child away from that initial dependency. He introduces the child to the reality that the world is not only a place of nurturing, but also a place where one must struggle, fail, and grow. For this reason, in many ancient cultures, the transition from boyhood to adulthood did not occur automatically. It was marked by rites of passage organized by the elder men of the community. These rituals had a very clear psychological purpose to separate the youth from his dependency on the mother and initiate him into the world of adults. The historian of religion Mircea Eliade noted that many of these rituals were symbolically powerful. They often involved leaving home, enduring trials, or surviving alone in nature. Psychologically, these experiences symbolized the death of childhood and the rebirth of an adult identity. In the modern world, however, most of these cultural structures have disappeared. The rites of passage that once helped individuals cross the boundary between adolescence and adulthood are largely absent in modern societies. And when those structures vanish, the responsibility of guidance often falls on the personal father. Yet reality shows that this guidance is not always present. A study cited in Finding Our Fathers by Sam Osherson found that only about 17% of American men reported having a positive relationship with their fathers during childhood. In many cases, the father was physically or emotionally absent. The psychoanalyst James Hollis described our time as the era of the absent father. The psychological consequences of this situation can be profound. When a boy grows up without a clear masculine model, without someone demonstrating how to face the world, endure failure, and build a meaningful life, the transition into adulthood can feel uncertain and frightening. The external world no longer appears as a field of opportunity. It appears instead as an unknown ocean filled with danger And when there is no one to guide the way, many individuals choose the safer alternative. They remain in the harbour of childhood. In this state, the Puer Aeternus continues to exist, not because of a lack of intelligence, not because of a lack of potential, but because no one showed them that there was a life worth stepping into. Part for the devouring mother when love becomes control. In the analytical psychology of Carl Jung, one of the most complex archetypal images within the human psyche is the mother archetype. In its positive form, this archetype represents nourishment, protection, and compassion, the psychological foundations that allow a child to develop during the earliest years of life. But Jung also warned that when the energy of this archetype becomes unbalanced, it can transform into something darker, the devouring mother. This figure does not necessarily represent a malicious mother. In many cases, it is a mother who deeply loves her child. However, that love becomes excessive, overprotective, and driven by a fear of losing the child. Instead of encouraging the child to step into the world, the mother unconsciously holds the child within her sphere of safety. In this environment, the child is protected from danger, but at the same time, he is also protected from the experiences necessary for psychological growth. Such overprotection often arises in families where the father is emotionally or psychologically absent. When this happens, the mother frequently assumes the primary role in the child's life. At the same time, the emotional absence of the father may create an emotional void within the mother herself. In some cases, that void becomes filled through an intensified relationship with the child. According to Jungian psychoanalysis, this dynamic can create an excessively fused psychological bond between mother and son. Within this relationship, both individuals unconsciously maintain their mutual dependency. Jung described this phenomenon with a striking observation. Behold, the secret conspiracy between mother and son, each helping the other betray life. His point was not that either person consciously intends harm. Rather, within this powerful emotional bond, both parties often avoid the challenge of growth. For the son, stepping into the world means confronting failure, competition, and responsibility. Remaining within the safety of this relationship is easier. For the mother, keeping the son close maintains a sense of purpose and emotional fulfillment. Yet the psychological cost of this unconscious arrangement can be significant. A person raised in an environment of excessive protection often lacks the opportunity to develop resilience in the face of reality. They do not learn how to fail. They do not learn how to take responsibility. And they do not learn how to build an independent life. Research in developmental psychology has shown that overprotective parenting, often referred to as helicopter parenting, is associated with higher levels of anxiety, dependency, and reduced self-efficacy in young adults. A 2016 study published in the Journal of Child and Family Studies found that students with highly controlling parents often struggled more with decision-making and stress management. From Jung's perspective, this is not merely a parenting issue. It is a deep psychological dynamic, because when an individual never fully separates from the protective sphere of the mother, whether literally or symbolically, they remain pulled back toward the original state of dependency. And within that state, the Puer Aeternus continues to live, not because the individual lacks intelligence, not because he lacks potential, but because a part of his psyche still longs for the absolute safety of childhood. Part 5. The spirit of regression, when the mind seeks to return to childhood. In the psychology of Carl Jung, maturity is not something that occurs automatically with age. Rather, it is a continuous psychological struggle between opposing forces within the human psyche. One force pushes us forward toward responsibility, independence, and the development of consciousness, but another force pulls us back toward the primal safety of childhood. Jung referred to this second force as the spirit of regression. It is an unconscious tendency within the human mind that seeks a return to a state where we are protected from the pressures of life. In that state, we do not need to make difficult decisions. We do not need to face failure, and we do not need to carry the burden of responsibility for our own lives. Jung described this condition with a powerful metaphor: sleep in the arms of the mother. Within this context, the Puer Aeternus is not simply an immature young person. It is an individual who has been captured by the psychological pull of regression. Such individuals may not necessarily live with their parents. They may hold jobs. They may appear outwardly adult. Yet on a deeper, psychological level, they are still avoiding what Jung called the battle of life. According to Jung, every individual must eventually choose between entering the battle of life or retreating into dependency. For the Puer Aeternus, the external world often appears uncertain and threatening. Meanwhile, postponement, entertainment, and short-term pleasures provide temporary psychological safety. Instead of stepping into the world to build a life, they retreat into familiar psychological shelters. In the modern world, these shelters have become remarkably accessible. The internet provides endless streams of entertainment. Video games offer achievement without real-world risk. Social media offers validation without the need for real accomplishment. And pornography provides intimacy without the complexity of real relationships. All of these share one psychological function: they allow individuals to experience reward without entering the struggle of reality. Modern psychological research has observed similar patterns. A 2022 report by the American Psychological Association noted rising levels of chronic procrastination and avoidance behaviors among young adults in digital environments. This does not mean technology alone causes the problem, but it reveals something important. When social structures no longer force individuals to mature, the natural tendency of the psyche to regress can become stronger than ever. And it is within this space that the Puer Aeternus continues to exist. Not because opportunities are absent, but because deep within the psyche, a part of the individual still longs for the absolute safety of childhood. Part 6. Rites of passage: the psychological threshold between childhood and life. When we examine the history of humanity, we discover that most traditional cultures understood something very clearly. A person does not automatically become an adult. Age may change, but psychological maturity often requires a conscious process of transformation. In many traditional societies, this transition was achieved through ceremonies that anthropologists call rites of passage. The historian of religion Mircea Eliade argued that such rituals played a crucial role in psychological development. They were not merely cultural traditions. They represented a profound psychological transformation. In many of these rituals, a young boy would be separated from his family, especially from his mother. Sometimes this separation occurred during the night. The elder men of the tribe would take the boy away from the familiar safety of his home. From a psychological perspective, this act carried deep symbolic meaning. It represented the death of childhood. The boy no longer belonged to the world of children. After this separation, the youth often had to endure a series of trials. He might be taken into dark caves, forced to survive alone in the wilderness, or subjected to demanding physical and psychological challenges. These trials were not meant as punishment. They were meant to help the youth confront fear and discover his own strength. Following this stage, a symbolic rebirth would take place. The young person would return to the community, but this time as a recognized adult member of society. In this way, ancient societies created a clear boundary between two stages of life: childhood and adulthood. In the modern world, however, most of these structures have disappeared. In many contemporary societies, there is no longer a clear ritual marking the moment someone enters adulthood. Instead, the transition becomes blurred and prolonged. A person may finish school, have a job, and even live independently, yet still feel as though they have not truly stepped into life. Research published in the Journal of Adolescence in 2018 suggests that many young people today lack a clear psychological milestone that signifies adulthood. As a result, the transition from adolescence to adulthood has become longer and more unstable than in traditional cultures. From the perspective of Carl Jung, this has a profound consequence. When society no longer provides structures to guide individuals into adulthood, each person must create that transformation within their own psyche. But this is far from easy. Because entering real life always requires one thing: letting go of the safety of childhood. And, for the Puer Aeternus, that is precisely the most difficult step. Part 7, Entering the Battle of Life. The Path Beyond the Eternal Child. After understanding the psychological forces behind the phenomenon of the Puer Aeternus, a natural question arises: can a person overcome this condition? In the psychology of Carl Jung, the answer is yes, but it is not an easy transformation. Because what is required is not merely a small change in lifestyle, it is a shift in the way a person relates to life itself. Jung repeatedly emphasized that psychological maturity requires something many people try to avoid: confronting reality. For the Puer Aeternus, reality often appears threatening. Responsibility implies risk. Commitment implies the loss of unlimited freedom. Failure implies facing one's own limitations. As a result, many remain in a world of endless possibilities. They believe that one day, when the conditions are perfect, their real life will begin. But Jung recognized a crucial psychological truth: life never begins in imagined possibilities. It begins only when a person enters into real action. This means accepting imperfection, accepting mistakes, and accepting the inevitability of failure. Through this process, individuals begin what Jung called individuation, the psychological journey through which a person gradually separates from early dependencies and begins to build a unique identity in the world. Importantly, this transformation rarely begins with dramatic decisions. It usually begins with small but meaningful steps: taking responsibility for one's life, making long-term commitments, and continuing forward even when the path becomes difficult. Modern psychological research echoes a similar insight. A 2017 study published in the Journal of Positive Psychology found that individuals who engage in purpose-driven work and long-term responsibilities tend to develop a stronger sense of meaning in life over time. In other words, meaning is not something we wait for. It is something created through engagement with life. From Jung's perspective, this marks the moment when a person begins to move beyond the Puer Aeternus. They no longer stand on the shore, dreaming about distant oceans. Instead, they step onto the ship and begin their journey. The journey is not always easy, but through struggle, effort, and responsibility, individuals often discover something profound. They are far stronger than they once believed. And perhaps this is the deepest message within Jungian psychology. Maturity is not the loss of youth. It is the courage to step into life and become the person you are capable of becoming. Perhaps the most important insight we can take from the idea of the eternal child is this: maturity is not about losing your youth, but about having the courage to step into life with all its risks and responsibilities. Every one of us carries a part that wants to remain in the safety of what is familiar. Yet real life only begins when we are willing to leave that harbor behind. From our perspective, the problem of the Puer Aeternus is not simply a personal weakness, but a psychological challenge of our time, a reminder that growing up is a conscious journey, not something that automatically happens with age. But what do you think? What do you believe makes it so difficult for many people today to fully step into adulthood? Share your perspective in the comments below. We would love to hear your thoughts.